everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, people may be wondering why we are dressed so well. You look marvelous, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I was intrigued by your choice of tie as well.
Thank you.
Um, Neither
Um,
red nor blue. Um,
yes, yes, for a very specific choice.
uh-huh.
And and they may be wondering about the backgrounds as well.
Well, uh,
Nicely put together backgrounds. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. I thought in the American spirit of if you want anything done right, you've got to do it yourself. I suggested that maybe you and I should run for the for the top office in the land. That we could put our collective philosophies together and run, maybe not run a great campaign, but at least make people think a little bit from our standpoint about what's wrong and what needs to be fixed.
Okay, so the highest office in the land, which one of us is Taylor Swift and which is Beyonce?
Well, whether we can see it or not, I'm not sure. Owing to your venerable age, I thought that you might be the better candidate for the top of the ticket,
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
and that I have a better chance of surviving anything and would be better off as the second.
Thank you. I also I like the slogan as our campaign slogan as well.
Thank
Enough
you.
is enough.
Enough is enough.
Yes. Um, the first thing though, there's the first question that has to be asked. What are you drinking this evening?
Oh, well, that I'm sure that question has actually started many political campaigns,
Yeah, exactly.
especially for our founding fathers. Um, but I've got I rushed and could not mix my own cocktail. I have a pre-mixed old fashioned here with a little bit of bitters uh, added. It was on ice when I started the project, but we're losing it a little bit now. But it's very nice, very nice. I enjoy it. And you, sir, what's in your glass?
I have some Uncle Nearest 1856
Oh,
bourbon.
yes, yes.
Um, it's Uncle Nearest named after the man who taught Jack Daniels distilling,
Hmm.
black-owned American company, and really nice bourbon.
Yeah, yeah. One of my top 10
Yeah.
bourbons that I also like the sort of uh, it's the Uncle Nearest name also has the maybe not Mr. Right, it's Mr. Right Now, kind of a
Oh, because it nearest. Okay.
yeah, kind of a vibe there. But
Well, here's to you, and here's to the United States of America. So the what we will be doing here is not presenting a finished, here's what it is. Here's the answer to everything. We are going to
right,
be discussing these policy points that would go into a platform. But I also want to start by saying neither one of us is qualified to be president.
no,
Neither one of us
absolutely not.
has been ever elected to a public office. Uh, um, I was elected president of band in high school, but
Oh,
that's
well, I've
but
been I've been a jury foreman 2 times.
oh,
Hmm. How
I've
about
been on a jury once. It was an interesting process. Um, so but I don't believe in somebody ascending to a high office because of celebrity. I think
you
people
don't you
should.
don't think we can use our vast media presence to springboard us into high office? Come
We
on, Joe.
could, but we shouldn't,
Oh,
because
all right.
I think people should learn and earn their way up and grow in experience. We have seen people who are celebrities ascend to high office and generally does not go well. Now, I will say, for example, somebody like President Eisenhower was the commander of the Allied forces in World War II.
Yes.
And if you know anything about what he did, this required an enormous amount of executive, managerial, and diplomatic ability to manage these different interests in different countries among the allies. It was really masterful work that he did
Well,
to
and
accomplish that. So that was
anybody
a
who knows,
qualification.
and
So
anybody who knows anything about the military knows that a four-star general is more of a, as you say, a diplomat and an administrator
yeah,
than they are a soldier.
but he had worked his way up to that.
Well, absolutely, but I'm saying that that is what qualified him for the
Yeah.
presidency.
So just to say, it wasn't the celebrity of he was actually qualified, and did a lot of things that I agree with as well, because he thought big. I mean,
Hmm.
the interstate highway system, big thinking, and in all of these policy ideas that we're discussing, we are, as always, looking at them through the filter of these chivalric virtues.
Yes.
I think thinking big is necessary. Um, there's so many, there are countries that are doing big things and thinking big, and I think the United States used to do that, but governed by short-sighted self-interest and profits, we have lost some of that. And I think we should think big again.
Well, and I almost hate to say it, but not exactly a counterpoint, but I think our politics have become more about staying in office than about serving your constituents.
I think for many people that's true.
And
Not
so
for
it,
all, but for many it is. And
yes,
part of that is one of the things we'll get to, which is campaign funding,
yeah, right.
because so much time, elected officials have to spend so much time raising money for their next campaign because of the cost of media and advertising and so on. So we will address that as well.
Right.
So to begin with, I think there are two existential crises that we must not lose sight of. And one is the climate crisis, climate change, and the other is democracy versus authoritarianism.
Yep, agreed.
And both are not only domestic issues, they are global issues, and as such, require collaboration, diplomacy, cooperation among countries. And so alienating allies and trying to go it alone like some fictional cowboy in a movie riding into town as a loner and riding out again
Yeah.
is not sufficient. We've talked before on several occasions about how human beings evolved to be a collaborative, cooperative species. That's what enabled humans to succeed.
Hmm.
And that's absolutely essential in those two existential crises.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And certainly turning international trading partners into competitors is a bad move for the country and for the economy.
Yes.
So, um,
Yeah, one, I mean, we can talk about economic policy and foreign trade and all of that at some point. That's really getting into the details of it.
well, and
Um,
this is also where I do not consider myself qualified to even comment or suggest a course necessarily. That's for experts. That is that is such a complex bailiwick that uh,
It's very complex. I have some thoughts on it. You know, the I've read Thomas Jefferson, is it Jefferson? No, Alexander Hamilton's report on manufacturers way back
okay,
when he was recommending tariffs in order to encourage domestic industries by raising the price of
right,
imported goods to a point where domestic industries were viable. They could compete with them because of startup costs and so on. And they didn't have the um, scale. Um,
right.
the difference is now is that we don't there are things that we don't, it's a global economy in some ways. We don't manufacture certain things. So you can't impose tariffs to encourage, that alone will not encourage domestic manufacturing. There are other things that have to be done to bring manufacturing domestically than simply raising tariffs. And raising tariffs doesn't punish foreign manufacturers, it punishes domestic consumers. So
Only in that it can limit their market.
it can, but if the goods that they're producing aren't available
Right,
elsewhere from domestic manufacturers, it doesn't limit their market, it only raises the prices.
right. Yeah, you have to establish the competition before
Right.
you introduce the tariff.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's and from an economic standpoint, and this is one of the things that I do feel strongly about, and I think we talk about it. We'll talk about it later under business regulation that we have become a monopolistic economy in this country. Even domestically, we are a monopolistic economy,
Yes.
and I would like to see our government try and do something that it used to do regularly and has stopped doing since I want to say the late 70s,
Oh,
early 80s.
yeah, Reagan. Reagan.
Reagan at least threw a big old wrench into it, but
Yeah. Um, I I was teaching a course, and it was about different forms of media, and about the middle of the semester, after a week each on different types of media, one student was exasperated and he said, "Oh, it's so frustrating. It's all the same. You know, somebody invents this, somebody else takes it and profits from it. Then there are a zillion different companies, and then now there's only two or three, and they control the whole industry." Said, "Yes, exactly. You have identified a pattern in this. It's
mhm.
true that the big media conglomerates control most of media. The big this, the big that, the different conglomerate companies, different holding corporations have so much sewn up. Um, it's what actually happens a lot with startups, and the goal of some startups is to start up a company, make something unique and that's gaining a following and
Mhm.
providing some bit of competition to the established companies so that the established company will purchase them, will buy them
Yep.
out,
Yep.
and then incorporate them or discard it in favor of what they already have. And then the serial entrepreneurs start something else and do it all over again. It's not about building something and sustaining it. It's about building it enough to get bought out and
Yeah.
profit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a business model.
Yes. So, so let's move on to your first point.
Okay. And this is about the Supreme Court. There was just legislation introduced actually to expand the Supreme Court um, with a bunch of other. It was a bill about reform. I don't remember what the title of the bill was, but um, introduced to reform the Supreme Court bring, it has to do with their reporting their taxes. They're putting more controls on the Supreme
Ethics.
Court
Yeah.
and expanding it to
13.
15. Yeah,
13. The
13.
number of so the number of Supreme Court justices has changed over
Yes.
the centuries and has always matched the number of federal courts below them because each Supreme Court justice is supposed to also be the justice through up through which the court reports. And there are 13 of those. There are only 9 Supreme Court justices. The number should be raised to 13.
Okay. And I think I mistakenly put 11. There's
Yeah,
13.
it's
I thought there were
13.
11 federal districts on, but okay.
13.
Yeah, so the number of judges should match the number of federal districts.
Yeah.
This new legislation uh, also talks about how many and when a president can install, how many you can have in one administration, which I thought was an interesting thing. My suggestion establishes more congressional ethics standards and oversight, just like this new bill does. Uh,
Then the ethics standards and oversight, there has to be some teeth to it,
yes,
some penalties. The only removal of a lifetime appointment to the court, any of the courts, is impeachment.
yeah,
Yeah. So there has to be something more than that.
and
This
I
would
also
require a constitutional amendment, by the way.
yes, it would. And I also suggested uh, uh, term limits, a 6-year review cycle requiring congressional majority to continue tenure to a 24-year maximum.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of the review cycle. I have to think about that. I like the idea of um, a rotating cycle of terms of service. I've
Hmm.
heard various ones proposed like 20 years, 24, but so that if it's staggered correctly, each presidential term, there would be
Right,
some stepping down and some appointments. And every presidential term, it would, if it's staggered correctly.
right.
And
I put it at 6 years because that also allows for a turnover of Congress.
yeah, um, that I want to think more about the review cycle, but I like the idea of term limits, staggered term limits, so
Right.
that it's yeah,
And the idea of a review is that the justice who has, after every 6 years, the justice comes before a congressional subcommittee and they question him on his decisions and his gifts and his tax returns and all that stuff publicly.
and say like the ones who uh, now the Senate hearing confirmation hearings on justices, the justices are coached to say nothing
Yeah, right,
essentially, and they don't. And however, the ones that have said at times, well, this is decided law and I will stand with decided law, then as soon as they had a chance, went back on that.
yeah, they just lied.
So yeah, they lied. And that would be for me grounds for removal
Right,
from
and
yeah,
is what would come up in their 6-year review.
yeah. Okay.
Hey, you promised this, you lied, you said that, you know,
See ya.
there's got to be, but again, you say like there's got to be some kind of teeth. There's got to be
Yep.
some set forth repercussion for unethical behavior.
Yep.
So, and that's all I had for that.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
next,
I think there's another Supreme Court issue, and that's the shadow docket where things sort of get decided, but they're never really up.
oh,
It's
they don't
that's
come
a
out in court.
yeah, yeah,
No, I agree.
yeah,
Everything should be argued publicly. That's the purpose of the court.
yeah. Um, Okay.
Do you want to just move
Yeah.
on to the next one
Yeah.
in no
Sure.
particular order?
Yep.
Uh, Voting rights.
Yes.
I a lot of these things are. I know that as a president, you can't just declare anything.
Right.
As
Right.
much as a president wants to get up and say, elect me and this will happen and this will happen and I'll do this and I'll do that. All of these things have to be legislated and gotten through Congress.
Exactly.
So a lot of my stuff is under voting rights. I say push for national adoption of nonpartisan districting reform, end
Yeah.
partisan gerrymandering, and reestablish common sense districting.
Yep.
There's already a movement for that. If I was actually running for office right now, that would be something I would be stumping on.
Yeah. I think the Supreme Court at one point said they couldn't rule on gerrymandering because they didn't have a way to evaluate the fairness of districts. That's been There have been many solutions proposed. Here's how you evaluate it. Here's,
Yeah.
undervoted, and here's how that that can be done. So I think those standards for I think those statistical, scientifically based standards for districting, I think make a lot of sense.
And
Uh,
even if it comes down to the nonpartisan, where it's
yes.
like in here in Michigan, we've
Yeah.
got a committee,
Yep.
a committee made up of both parties and independents
Yep.
that draw the lines, that make the final decisions, and there has to be a vote, and a majority has to agree that to redraw the lines.
Well, and it's an improvement. And I think
Yeah.
that um progress is moving things forward, and it's sometimes incremental. It's not all or nothing. So it's a step forward. It's better than it was. That's good.
I'd like to see there's a lot of call for um, you have to identify yourself when you go to vote, right? So I think the state should supply a state ID.
I I I was talking with somebody about the requirements for voter ID. So first of all, it's really a non-issue. The number of people who are given the penalties
Hmm.
for individual voter fraud, the number of people who try to do that is minuscule,
Vanishingly small.
vanishingly small. And so it's really a non-issue. It's making an issue out of something that's not really an issue. But
But
if you're going,
there are other values to a state issued identification.
yes, I agree. So my point was, if you're going to require an ID for somebody to vote, and somebody has to pay for that ID. They have to get a driver's license. They have to pay for some
Yep.
kind of ID. They have to drive somewhere to get an ID. That's a cost to them, and that is in effect a poll tax, and poll taxes are unconstitutional.
Now,
Poll
we
taxes were part of Jim Crow laws that were a way of keeping black people from
right,
voting.
sure. Now, I think that you've got to go and it needs it's a photographic ID,
Right.
right? So you need to go somewhere official to have it done. That I don't see any way to get around that.
Right. But transportation to and from for people who can't do that, that's certainly a possibility too. Getting a state issued ID should not incur a cost.
Well,
If it's a requirement for things, should not incur a cost.
should not incur a prohibitive cost.
Right.
So if you don't drive, there's no point in you getting a driver's license.
Right.
So, but taking a bus to a Secretary of State's office is not a significant expenditure if the ID itself is free and it comes to you in the mail when it's ready.
If you don't have to do it during working hours, because there are
Well,
people who can't take off from work to do it. They can't, and if it's not open on, during hours when they're not working, how are they going to, then they have to take a day off.
I think this is a state to state thing. I recognize that, but I mean, yes, you're right. That is, but I feel like something we've got to move in that direction some way. There's
Right.
no way to
And this
say,
would be a positive move in that direction. I agree.
yeah.
Um actually, and I didn't mention this before to you, but having lived in three different, four, five different states, having had different driver's licenses, and knowing that every state I've moved to has their own way, county by county, state by different things to get a license, to get a license plate, to get a driver's license. And I was years ago, somebody from England that was talking to, and they said, "Why don't you have a national driver's license?"
Well,
I said, "I think we should. It's money. It is absolutely money. That's the reason that different in some states you have to go to this county office to get your driver's license, and this county office to get your license plate, and this one and this, and it's all money. It's controlled by local county officials, and it's a mess. I think there should be a national driver's license.
well, and it's not like they don't exist.
Yeah,
Over the road truckers have a federally regulated license for travel.
right.
So,
So that, I think that would, and that would lose us a lot of votes in a lot of states.
well,
So
but that's the thing, right? Your policies shouldn't be about getting the most votes. Your
right,
policy should be, here's what I think is right. If
doing the most
enough
good.
people vote for me,
Yeah,
then they'll get it.
right,
If not enough people vote for me, oh well, I guess the people don't want it enough.
right, right.
So, um,
Um, okay, continue.
so the next thing, 1 week of in-person voting, right? That guarantee you everyone federally is guaranteed 3 paid hours for any of those days that require personal time off. So you
Okay, but
get
you're not proposing doing away with absentee voting or vote by mail.
no, not at all.
Okay,
I'm just saying that if you don't want to do that, if you actually want to go and vote in person, and if some municipalities insist on you voting in person,
yeah,
then you have a whole week. You can pick any day during that week to go to your polling place. And if you have to do it during your work time, you get 3 paid hours to go do it.
yep. I like that. I think what has to work with that though is there has been some chicanery with the allocation of where voting machines are.
Agreed. And I would put that back up with the gerrymandering
Yes.
question.
So there have been some places where, oh, the voting machines allocated to districts that vote in tend to vote for the party that's not
Hmm.
the Secretary of States,
Yeah.
tend to do, they have fewer voting machines. The lines are longer. People are waiting in line for huge length of time versus other ones where they can go in and go out.
Well,
And
and laws
so that
against,
needs to be addressed too.
agreed. And stupid laws against, you can't give people water that are standing in line to vote. That's, that's voter suppression. That's
Yes,
really what we're talking about here.
we are talking about voter suppression and
And I hope
states
there's a
that
whole
are
raft of lawsuits come. I hope there's a whole raft of lawsuits this election about it.
states that are purging voter rolls
Yep.
and doing so in a way that is politically motivated,
Hmm.
removing legitimate voters from the rolls. Um, and I think that is that chicanery needs to be also prohibited.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
So
now, and I suggested, and we had a short discussion about this before we started recording, regarding the Electoral College.
get rid of it.
And I think that it has some value. It had a reason for existing.
It did have a reason for existing, but it is too prone to fuckery.
Yes. So, and this is the kind of the problem. It would need a national movement. This is not something that can be federally regulated. But my suggestion is that rather than abolishing it altogether and making it simply a popular vote, because the the argument originally was that, well, the argument originally was that we need to put it in the hands of responsible landowning gentlemen
Yes.
rather than just regular popular because it turns out that people will vote for an idiot.
That's
So
true, but some of the respectable land owning gentlemen are the ones who are the biggest supporters of certain idiots
agreed.
because they think they can profit by having an idiot in office.
But the ostensible reason, okay, was that rural states with smaller populations would be dictated to by the more populated coastal states. Okay. Okay.
Not
Now,
when the electoral college started, there was only one coast.
yes, but the argument was the same. It
Yeah,
was
but
New England was going to dictate to the rest of the colonies what
right,
was going to happen.
right.
That's true.
Yeah, but I
Or that was the fear, or the
it
least, like I
was.
say,
It was.
the
But what
excuse.
has happened is is I so I believe in the principle of one person, one vote. The
Okay.
apportionment of of uh, there's so many different schemes going on state by state trying to, oh, we'll do it by county, oh, we'll do it by legislative district, oh, we'll allocate by this, we'll do it this way. There's so many different versions of how this is being done in federal elections. There needs to be a standard for how federal elections are done, and
But
popular
that's
vote is the easiest and makes the most sense to me.
okay.
I don't think one person, one vote, nobody's disadvantaged. Your vote, if you live in a small town somewhere, is equal to a vote or somebody who lives in a large state. Right now, people, the the candidates campaign mostly in the big swing states, the big electoral
Right.
vote states. That would no, and but campaigns are not only in person, they are on media and they're
Right.
on the internet and they're inescapable.
And let me say that a lot of our Constitution in many ways is outdated in that a lot of the mechanisms for our democracy are rooted in a rural agrarian society
Mhm.
that no longer exists since the 18th century.
Yeah,
Our founding fathers could not possibly envision the kind of uh, population densities that we take for granted now. So this is a lot of the problems I think come from that. They
yes,
also didn't recognize that. I mean, in-person campaigning and campaigning by leaflet and pamphlet and bill were it. If you could get something published in a local gazette that wasn't owned by your opponent's best friend,
yeah.
great. But that's no longer, none of that is really necessary anymore.
No, the money to spend on media has become hugely important, and we'll talk about that as
Yeah.
well.
So,
Um,
but let me just finish and we
okay.
can this is just a proposal. It can be discarded.
Right.
My idea was to, as a, and call it a compromise, rather than abolishing it altogether, push to get, push to eliminate the all or nothing states, and that the electors from each state are apportioned by the in accordance to the popular vote. That if so a smaller state that only has 8 electors, right, as compared to a state that has 27, their population, yeah, each elector has more constituents than the 27 person, or has
Right.
fewer, whatever.
Okay. I see what you're saying. So here's the problem with that is that if a state has 8 electors
Hmm.
and one candidate gets 10% of the vote and the other gets 90% of the vote, are you going to split electors? Can somebody get,
No,
7.5 electoral votes and a half for another person? If you're not doing it by percentage, you're rounding. Your rounding error can cause the same kind of problems that we've seen in two presidential elections in the past, well, since 2000,
2000.
that the person with the most popular votes did not get the most electoral votes. And
No, but that's because the states where those small percentage differences were all or nothing states.
but if you are allocating electoral votes and the percentage, and you're not allocating a percentage of electoral vote, but you're making a rounding error, and that's going to accomplish the same thing.
I don't think that well, this is something that would need to be gamed out.
Right. It would.
I don't think it would be as, I don't think the two are directly
I know, but I, I
comparable.
I can see that it could go that way. And
I see your point.
right,
I'm not sure that it that it comprises
right.
a large enough
So,
error.
but right now, the states that are talking about doing what you're saying are doing so by they're not doing it by popular vote, they're trying to do it by legislative district. And
And
that's a
I
problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's
Now
just
there is
until they get
also
rid of gerrymandering in their, until they ungerrymander their
right,
districts,
right,
that's just another game.
right. There is also the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is an agreement that and it's once enough states join this, they will implement it, that a state would award all of their electoral votes to whichever candidate won the overall popular vote. That's in effect, it's an end run around the electoral college. It would essentially abolish the electoral college.
But
And which I'm in favor of because it's outdated and it's violates it has led to problems,
but
demonstrable
see,
problems in years.
but that just they become as long as they're an all or nothing state, right? And you're saying it's an end run. They're
Yeah.
that someplace like Colorado.
But it would be all or nothing, but the all is to whoever wins the national popular vote.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
See, that's how they give all. It's not who wins the popular vote in their state, it's who
Okay.
wins the national popular vote. They get all their electoral votes.
Okay.
So, okay.
I think that silences the people who did not vote. I, again, I think that takes the vote away from any minority vote in that state. If 20% of the people in a state didn't vote for the national winner,
Right.
those votes mean nothing. Those votes disappear.
No, it doesn't mean they mean nothing. It means they voted for their chosen candidate and their chosen candidate lost.
Oh, well, okay. Well, all right. Right, because it goes towards the national total. I
Right,
see
it
what you're
does.
saying.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so I support that. If we can't get rid of the electoral college, and I support the national popular vote interstate compact.
All right. So moving on from that, I've got tax reform.
You
And
also had campaign reform, but this is in no particular order.
oh,
So
that's true. Well, while we're talking about voting, I guess campaign reform follows.
okay,
Um, First of all, I would repeal Citizens United. Very
absolutely,
first thing.
absolutely.
Um,
No dark money, no hidden money.
no.
Disclose all contributions. Absolutely.
Yep. There's no such thing as a private PAC.
Yep.
Um, yeah. All campaign contributions are publicly disclosed above a certain
Money
threshold amount.
is not speech.
Pardon me?
Money is not speech. That was the finding of
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what was the finding.
yeah,
Money does not, well, money is not equal to speech.
right.
Should not be equal to speech.
And
That means some
corporations are
people have
not
more speech than others.
corporations are not people either.
Well, there's that too. Um, so all campaign contributions publicly disclosed above a certain threshold amount and be subject to audit,
Yep.
public audit.
Yep.
Establish fund matching below a certain threshold. That
Okay. So
if you can you can you get federal fund matching until you reach a certain dollar amount. Then you stop getting matching funds from the federal government.
oh, okay.
Um, and
That
this
would
was
enable some people to run for office who can't afford to do so now.
exactly.
Okay.
Um, Reestablish a version of the fairness doctrine, allow FCC oversight. My camera's in my way. Requiring journalistic standards be met by any platform or agency. This is very difficult, and also, well, this is allow an FCC oversight requiring journalistic standards be met by any platform or agency before being allowed to self-label as news.
I like that. I would add to that, or I'd self-identify as a university.
Yeah, well, that used to be a thing. A there used to be a regulation about that, and I don't
Oh,
know if that just
there's still accreditation, but there are unaccredited universities that are scams
yeah.
that
Well,
and
our
they give themselves false legitimacy by calling themselves a university, and it's not a university.
right.
So,
University has a meaning.
yes.
Um, and I have all national debate or require real-time fact checking. Participating candidates must be allowed to approve an equal number of questioners. Now, that was just
I'm not sure what
basic.
that means.
That means that, uh,
Moderators? The
hmm?
They have to approve the moderators or
Yes, yes,
well, if we're discussing debate and how debates are done, the way the modern political debate is done has nothing to do with someone's qualification for office.
okay,
It's a debate performance. It's a debate show. It's not it's it's like a really badly structured job interview where the job interview doesn't really have anything to do with the candidate's qualifications because they can't have notes, they can't discuss they can't it's a completely different skill set doing that performance. I think they are increasingly less useful. I'm not sure how they
yeah,
could get less useful than and there's the I don't I think I and I would need to give this some thought, but I think the whole idea of political debates needs to be rethought.
I could certainly get behind that, but or at least revamped to reflect what used to be a debate, what debates used to be back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, or going back to Lincoln and Douglas, but um yeah, I think there are other this is an issue I need to look at. I just know that um I used to watch debates with great interest. I can't stand watching them now
Yeah,
because they're not debates. They're not policy positions. They are statements. Oh, I'll pivot to, I don't want to answer that, so I'll pivot to this
yeah,
and make some rehearsed statement, and it's not a debate. I'm I'd like policy discussions. I'd like to actually know what people are thinking about. Um,
yeah. I'd rather see moderators put put pointed questions and keep candidates between the rails.
yes, yeah.
Okay,
So
so
I'll have to revisit that. Maybe we can talk about that another time, but I'd like to see debates replaced with something else.
I've also got here tax reform,
Yep.
reimpose a higher progressive tax scale, close loopholes for avoiding taxation, increase incentives for reinvestment, and charity contribution. I mean, these are all basic stuff that
Yeah.
we used to count on.
I was explaining to somebody who was um talking about I mentioned high somehow the subject came up higher taxes. So, well, first of all, you have to understand that tax brackets, you're taxed more over a certain amount. You're taxed at this rate for this amount, and or this rate at this amount, and then over it's this amount. I said, but what you're missing is that in the 50s and 60s, when there was a really high marginal tax rate, that's at the very top,
Hmm.
money that someone took out, to money that someone got in income that they reinvested in a business
Right.
was deducted. It lowered their tax bracket. So it encouraged people to reinvest to
Yep.
invest in businesses. That's why high income earners, doctors, lawyers, executives, others, although executives didn't make as much then as they do now, they formed groups where they bought businesses.
They were venture capitalists.
Well, that's a little different, venture capital, but
Well, what we know now as a venture
yeah,
capitalist, they
they
were,
bought businesses
yeah,
so that they were taking their money and putting it into something. And then when they retired, they could sell their interest in the business, take the profit out, and after a certain age, their tax bracket is lowered.
right.
So it made sense and it worked for the economy and it worked for everybody because it built businesses and it was people had a retirement. It was good for that. It all works together in that way. So
Yes, very
yeah,
much.
I agree. Yeah.
Um,
The
and some
one
of
of the
these other,
problems is that there are people who are very wealthy who have a very low reported income
yes,
because they don't take their money in salary. Their money is in investments and so on. And so
right.
that
And they
needs
use their assets to borrow against, and of course, any loan against or any payment against a loan is a deduction. So they borrow huge
yes,
amounts of money, spend that money, and call that a deduction from the income that they do report.
yes. Again, this is an area I think we both agree where expertise is required.
Yes.
And I can think of several people renowned economists who I would call on for their
Yeah.
expertise in drafting policy to address this. But it's in the name of fairness,
Yes,
fairness and
absolutely. A lot
justice.
of this is.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and so part and parcel of this is
Honesty,
empower.
justice, fairness. Exactly.
I would empower and fund an IRS task force on fraud and avoidance at higher income levels.
Yep.
That's that our current administration is trying to do that already.
Yep.
Uh, Increase the child and dependent tax credit, increase child care deductions. Also, our current administration is trying to do
Yep.
that. Increase taxes on multiple single family domiciles. If you own more than one home,
Hmm.
anything that you do not declare as a primary residence gets taxed at a different rate, higher rate,
Doesn't
at a exorbitant rate.
isn't that currently the
I don't know.
yeah, I don't know either. But I think if somebody has an investment property or they buy properties to have as a landlord or an Airbnb or something, I think they're taxed.
I don't think they are their property taxes are different. They are taxed on the income from the property. But I don't think the property tax is any different. I would
Oh, so
change,
you're increased when you say increased taxes, you're talking about the property taxes,
yes,
because they're commercial rather
yes.
than
Well,
residential.
even if I don't, even if you're not making money off it, even if you just own four homes that you want to travel around during the year, all of those other homes that is not your primary residence,
Yeah,
taxed at a higher rate,
higher property tax rate.
higher property tax. Yeah.
Well, and that actually leads to, which will connect to another issue, which is how schools are funded because it tends to be property taxes.
Hmm.
And there
Exactly.
needs to be another way of funding schools, public schools, because public schools in wealthy districts without, yeah, anyway, we'll get to that one, I
Right.
think.
Um, and that's all I had for tax reform
Yeah, I think
so
there's
far.
more we would need to look into about for lack of a better term, a wealth tax. It's not exactly that. It's the what is, as you said, unreported income because of the way that people can manipulate money and shenanigans in
Right.
terms of it's all legal and it's all bullshit because it's taking
You're right.
advantage. Yeah,
Just because it's legal doesn't make it right.
yeah, exactly. So
Um, and sort of in the same vein, business regulation. No government bailouts of corporations without prosecution and jail time of contributing executives.
it depends what you're talking about. I mean, if there's actual criminality and
Yes.
malfeasance, yeah, if there's criminality and malfeasance, there have been like the 2008 financial crash. There was criminal activity that went unpunished,
Hmm.
unprosecuted. There were other companies that suffered as a fallout from that needed help, that had done nothing wrong, but the people who had caused the economy to crash didn't,
Yes.
they should have been prosecuted. So companies where there's no malfeasance, but it's a victim of economic chicanery by other companies.
Well, and this again is a function of the monopolistic
Right.
economy that we have, where Chase Manhattan and a few other banks control uh, where the money is at any given moment for all the other banks in the country.
Too big to fail is too big. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That's exactly the underlying sentiment there.
yeah.
Um, I would reestablish the power of the Federal Trade Commission, refocus efforts to break up monopolies and encourage competition.
Yep.
How that would be done would be very complicated and very difficult and would require a panel of experts to
Yep.
implement.
Exactly.
I'd reform patent law and reduce lengths of patent terms to 10 years.
So tell me about this. Um,
Well, one of the things in particular is companies like Monsanto patenting naturally occurring seeds.
yeah.
That's just that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, I
they're they're
yeah.
being able to sue
Oh, sue
If
someone and the seeds blew into another farmer's yard and then they sue that farmer. It's
right.
like sue the wind,
Yeah,
motherfucker.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that there are there are patent trolls who buy patents, sue companies. They essentially make their living by suing companies for patent infringement.
Yeah,
And companies will settle rather than fight it out in court.
right.
So
But if
that's
you
a
re
problem too. And I don't think that this addresses that.
well, if you reduce the length of the patent, the opportunities for that to happen are smaller. It also drives a certain amount of innovation. If your patent's only good for 10 years, you've got to come up with something new because your patent becomes public domain after that.
Well, I know one of the things that
And that also increases competition, and that's good for pricing.
I know one of the things that some pharmaceutical companies will do is slightly change a formulation and then do a new patent on the new
Right.
formulation. So I don't think it would cover that, but again, expertise is needed.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So we're defining principles here
Yes,
and
exactly.
absolutely acknowledging that more expertise is needed in the specific implementation.
I would call for strengthening and enforcing conflict of interest laws on executive boards and corporations.
There's so many boards where the people on the boards, they're interlocking,
Hmm.
overlapping boards, and yeah,
Yeah.
definitely there could be conflicts of interest. Yeah.
People on the boards of corporations that would norm the same person on two different boards of two different companies that would normally be in competition with each other.
Yeah.
Now, and I put in here with some of these, if some of these things could be addressed that we've talked about just already, I'd be happier returning some of the stuff back to the states. But until all of the things in the above, and maybe a few more that you've suggested, until those things are rectified, I'm loath to let states handle the legislation regarding these consequent things.
Yeah.
Um, oh wait, I also have in here neither legislators nor members of their immediate family may hold board seats or stock in companies which they are responsible for regulating.
Yes. Actually, I think if someone
And
is elected to public office, all of their investments should be put in a blind trust. Period.
I think they should be I think they should be dispensed with. I don't no blind trust. If you cannot own stock in that company.
Yeah, I think if
I
you're
would
responsible for regulating it, yeah,
I take it a
it
step
has to
further.
be divested, and then the blind trust has to invest in other things. Yeah,
Yep,
that you have no say in. Yeah.
right.
And
Um,
violation of that is should be a federal crime.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And certainly grounds for dismissal from Congress.
Office. Yeah.
Uh, so again, if those things can be taken care of, I think these other things can be more safely returned to the states.
Hmm.
Education.
Yes.
This is a hot button for a lot of people.
That's something I'm very interested in.
Zero public funds for private and religious schooling. Zero. Increased funding for increased funding for public education.
Yeah, and we've talked before about the reason that higher education is so expensive. And a third of the reason is that state support for institutions of higher education was really cut. And that,
Yep.
again, starting with Reagan when he was governor of California,
Yep.
really cut. And that shifted the burden to tuition. Um, Another third of it is the increase in the number of and the compensation for administrators. And another third of it is the increase in building and amenities costs and building, because they're trying to attract students, because students are the source of tuition, source of
Right,
funding.
right.
I was explaining to somebody that no, the availability of student loans is not what caused the increase in tuition. It was a response to the increase in tuition.
Yeah,
And what we absolutely need to do is make sure higher education, and that's whether it's college, university, or a
trade
trade,
schools.
yeah, something, which are now community colleges have become trade schools, um, de facto what trade schools were. Whatever it is, needs to be available to students of any economic background. If the universities are only available to the wealthiest students, we will have
Right,
a problem. We'll have a more of an aristocracy than we're already trending to.
right.
Um,
I would actually increase taxation on private school profits
yeah,
and cap administrative executive compensation at for-profit institutions.
yeah. I think that there's, um, and this is really getting into the weeds of the ratio um, of full-time versus adjunct faculty at institutions
Hmm.
and their compensation and benefits and all of that. It's a real mess, um, because a lot of schools have shifted the burden onto contingent or adjunct faculty
Right, not
who,
offering tenure anymore.
right, right. Um,
And you're obviously more ensconced in that whole thing than I am,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it obviously needs some kind of reform.
yes, yes. Um, I think there was over the past several years, past several administrations, um, uh, increased scrutiny of for-profit higher education. And I can understand this. I taught in a
Mhm.
for-profit college system. I taught in at several locations, and it was great when it started. And then the investment company that took it over started squeezing it, and they destroyed it.
Well, when
And
education becomes a commodity,
exactly, yeah,
it becomes a problem for society because only if you can
exactly,
afford it can you get the commodity.
yes, yeah, I agree. So,
Um, so,
um,
and just as a general principle, I've got reestablish respect for teachers as a profession, push to include an automatic cost of living raises in public schools.
yeah, the teachers unions have contracts. I think demonizing teachers unions just pisses me off. Um,
Yeah.
and I would put in here that school boards, um, school boards are elected, and they often, the people who are on them, have too often they don't, they have a political or social agenda, and rather than an educational background.
Right.
And I, I remember seeing an interview with this was years ago, this was in the early 2000s, a fellow in Texas who was elected to the Texas State School Board. He was a not an educator. He said, "It's time we showed these experts that they don't know what everything, and
I've
um,
thought of running for a local school board just because I don't have any children in the system.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
may I may at some point.
yeah,
I've thought
how,
about it because
what more unbiased
yeah,
person can you have on the board
yeah,
that is not their kid? It's my community.
yeah. And I've thought about doing that as well, because similar reason, but I also have experience as an educator.
Well, yeah, yeah. You probably got a better case for getting in than I do, but um, let's see. After that, gun control,
Yep.
also a super hot button. And also is an argument about the. I come from the position of the well-regulated militia was put in the Constitution for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, and that again, we're talking about an agrarian society
Yeah.
where people hunted to live. So
Yeah.
everyone already had some sort of a firearm in their home and
Yeah.
needed it to survive.
Yeah.
A large percentage of the population. There
Yeah.
was
And we can
also,
talk about the history of why that's in there. And there are several different historical threads that all converged.
mhm,
Concern that the new country would be reinvaded by
yep,
England, concern for a slave uprising, concerns for, there were a number of reasons that converged that led to that admitted compromise, as so
right.
much of the Constitution was.
And that also we have talked about this in previous episodes where, and the more I listen to the early founding of this country, is that our our original founders did not think of us as a single mono, monolithic country.
Right.
We were we were United States. And when there's a certain legitimacy to be talking about states' rights, except that we're 200 years beyond that.
And states' rights became a code phrase.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
But initially, by our founders, to be fair, they believed that states were colonized by particular people. People would come to this country and migrate to a state that suited their beliefs and their
Mhm.
religion or whatever. That's absolutely true. We've had those skirmishes between states, and
Yeah,
that was
we've
a
had a
concern
big
that,
one too.
well, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, even before the Civil War,
Yeah.
we had there was a concern that states would take territory from other states by force. So having a militia in place to stop that was useful since a federal army couldn't respond quickly enough.
Yeah, there were several, as I said, there were several reasons that
Right.
converged leading to this. Um, I think the idea that we're a collection of semi-autonomous states, first of all, the original compact, pre-constitution compact didn't work. And
Yeah,
so,
right. The
and
Second Congressional Congress.
right, the Civil War, the consequence of the Civil War was that this was one country called
Yes.
the United States, but more emphasis on united than on
Yeah,
state.
agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Yeah,
And like I said, that was 200 years ago
yeah,
that these concerns were top of mind. It also, again, goes back to communication and travel were not as readily available as they are now. So you needed smaller communities and smaller governments to conduct business and regulate commerce and all
yeah,
of that.
yeah,
That is no longer an issue.
yeah.
Okay, um, so under gun control, I would like to establish, this is my idea for however much it's worth, establish a federal definitions matrix for different types of firearms. And I would divide them into sport, defense, and military based on things like concealability, caliber, power, magazine capacity. Again, this is something that could be hashed out in a committee of experts, right?
Yeah.
M-
Interesting.
Modification that causes a firearm to increase in category without registration. So is a felony. So you cannot modify a gun that fits in one category You cannot modify it so that it falls into another category without a registration.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, and establish a digital federal firearm database with universal registration of firearms designated, particularly designated for the military grade arms.
Okay. So, couple of things. A lot depends on your definitions here.
Well, of course,
And I
but it's
think
about,
that,
and what this is about establishing those definitions
right.
federally.
And I think that the firearms industry has re redefined the AR style rifle as the modern sporting rifle, is what
Yeah,
they're calling it. But I see what you're saying here, and I think there are some things that are cosmetic and some things that are functional. Um,
sure.
I think you've got something here. I think the point I made to somebody is that um, you either regulate the guns, or if you won't aren't willing to do that, you regulate the people. And if you aren't willing to regulate who the people who can have guns, you regulate the guns. I think we need some combination of both.
Well,
That
that's what registration is about.
right. Well,
If
you're
you've got a
saying
felony arrest record,
registration of firearms, but you're talking about registration of you're a firearms owner, you're registering that you own a firearm.
yeah,
Right. You didn't really say that. You said registration of firearms.
if somebody has to own it.
Right. But that's right. I just
Okay.
clarifying what
Oh,
you mean by
okay.
that. I think that I would support the idea of I mean, I already have a
Yeah, so
uh,
do I.
concealed carry license, and I had to take a class. I had to um um take the the exam, the class, the all of that, get fingerprinted, all of that. I think that makes sense. I know that there are people opposed to that because of their fear of government, but I think that no, I think it makes sense to do that. But I would say not just a simple renewal. I think it should be like a I think it should be like a driver's license in ways
Yeah,
that there are different categories of driver's license. You
yeah.
know,
Okay.
there's motorcycle endorsement, there's a commercial endorsement, different categories you have to, and I think the requirement for training should there should be more training. I look at driving licenses, for example, in other countries that
Hmm.
have a higher requirement for testing
Yep.
and for renewal of it. You have to retest, you got to pass an exam, you got to do a driving test, you have to be able to drive better. I th First of all, I think we should have driver's licenses as well, but I think that makes a lot of sense with firearms licensing. That
Yeah.
yeah, you
This
should
is,
have to prove that you know what you're doing and that you're still capable of it. I also support the idea of red flag laws,
yeah,
that people who
absolutely.
are identified as a danger to themselves or others, yeah, they shouldn't have access to firearms. And while they're being evaluated and helped, presumably.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah.
Uh, Now, and the last thing I got to, and again, this was something that just this came up in, somebody said, usually in this case, somebody said something stupid online, and it spurred me to think, no, and rather than just argue with them online, I would go back to this little document I've been reading from here and um, clarify for myself
Mhm.
what I thought was reasonable.
Okay.
So, under reproductive rights,
Yes.
Uh, and this really gets into health and privacy, but I think contraceptive programs, including tube tying and vasectomy, should be free below certain income levels.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Free, or at least you ought to be able to apply for, federal money to go have one of these procedures done. And contraceptives, condoms, IUDs, diaphragm, that kind of thing, that should be subsidized
Yeah. Yep.
for anybody below a certain income.
Yep.
Um, I and I went on to, in my mind, this is what I think is reasonable. But
Well,
you pointed out that, and I didn't um, enumerate it here, but absolutely within the the AMA's recommendations, you had a better.
yeah, I went to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and they support the availability of high quality reproductive health services for all people. And they oppose any effort that impedes access to abortion care and interferes in the relationship. This is the important part. They oppose efforts that interfere in the relationship between a person and their healthcare professional. These decisions are very personal, and I think these are healthcare decisions. These are this is where it should be. The 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 fictional statements, the lies that are told about what's going on and what happens are harmful. They're actually cause great harm and death. The so I would go with their recommendations, and that's this is a healthcare decision and should be between a, a person and their healthcare professional, period.
Okay, and I think that that's it. I would generally agree with that.
Yeah.
And here, what I go on to is if legislation is absolutely necessary, okay,
Well, okay, but
or as to say, here is what the federal government says that states can and cannot do.
well, and this is an interesting point because what you're doing is offering a compromise before negotiations have even started.
Okay.
Instead of saying, this is what I believe, and somebody else says, no, it should be, Handmaid's Tale, you know, okay, well, that's like saying, well, let me between, respecting people and, fascism, let's compromise just a little bit of fascism. No, I'm not willing to do that. There's some things that I won't compromise on. And individual, that kind of individual personal uh, respect for bodily autonomy, respect for individuals, respect for people. I'm not willing to compromise with people who are who are making shit up for political gain.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I'm not arguing
Right,
that position at all.
right.
Again, what I'm trying to say is if if a state wants to regulate beyond what you're talking about, which is between the
A person and
a,
their
a person and
healthcare.
their healthcare professional,
Yeah.
okay, that this is this is a way for the federal government to say this far, no further.
Okay.
Right? So, and it's really just it's a timing sort of a thing that legal, and this is again federal legislation, legalizes abortion before 10 weeks at will, as
So
far as
right,
I'm concerned.
10 weeks is about halfway into the
First trimester, which is 21 weeks.
no, halfway into the second. 10 weeks. There are
20,
women
21 weeks, a trimester is 21 weeks.
there are women who don't know that they're pregnant at 10 weeks.
I know, but if they do, my point is, if they do at before 10 weeks, I know that 6 weeks is difficult, but at 10 weeks, there's no, this is where um, the, what do they call it? The morning after pill or these kinds of things come in because they're trying to legislate against that kind of stuff, and states have.
Yeah, I see the um I read an interesting proposal. It was a compromise position that I'd never heard anyone say before. And there's a philosopher, a French philosopher, I think, and he was saying that if we parallel brain death as death
Hmm.
with the onset of brain activity as the beginning of life, and I need to talk about life in a second, then that occurs about the middle of the second trimester, which is 4, 8, 12, 16, about around about 18 weeks is when brain activity starts, middle of the second
Okay.
trimester. And he would say that that's a compromise position, that before 18 weeks, it's not, you know, so I would change that. However, the idea that I think the phrase life begins at conception is problematic because a cell is alive by
I I
all
agree.
definition.
I
The
absolutely agree with
question
that.
is personhood.
Yes.
And all of these all of the laws that the um,
Heart.
regulations that and laws that people want to pass regulating this are often religious and not scientific. They're about personhood. Oh, a corporation's a person, but a person, when is a person a person? Well, Judaism holds that until the first breath,
Yes.
or the a baby has to be 51% born before its life can be prioritized over the mother. So a lot of the laws I see passed are violations of religious freedom as well.
Yes.
So I come back to this has to be a decision between the the person and their healthcare provider. I understand what you're trying to do here, but and I understand what you're trying to do with defining timing, but I think for me that's too much. That's giving too much. That's
Okay.
giving too much away.
Okay.
So
So going on.
yeah, okay.
um, and like I said, myself personally, I'm absolutely in your camp.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that if the federal government has to regulate and say states cannot pass laws that violate these rules,
Yes. Rule one, the decisions are between a person and their healthcare provider, period. States cannot violate that. Federal
and
law.
okay, and I think that there's uh, by defining it for people, it makes it easier to swallow for some people.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about here, is it? If we're
That's what I'm
talking
talking about.
about if we're talking about compromise, if we're talking about legislation, if we're talking about what could be accomplished, that's entirely different than saying, here's our platform, here's what we stand for.
Okay. Yeah,
Enough is enough, right?
but in a lot but in a lot of these, I've put it forward as I know that the president can't declare these things, that
Right.
these are
No,
legislative initiatives.
right. And this would be mine.
Okay.
So
And I think that I've got I'm I understand I agree with
yeah,
you in principle, but this is as far back as I would pull. Okay,
yeah.
let me put it that way.
Okay. The just to clarify here, so because we're kind of mixing things up here in terms of here's what I believe, here's what I stand for, here's what I support, here are my principles, here's what's possible.
There's that. And
That's
again, here's what I would accept.
okay.
While I
Okay.
have this principle, here's what I would accept
Okay.
as reasonable legislation.
Okay.
Okay?
And
I'll put
yeah.
it that way.
Okay.
Um, this is a bill I would sign. I'll put it that way. If it came
Okay.
to it. If I
Okay.
couldn't get what you were talking about,
Yeah.
if this is the best I could get, I would sign it. But if it wasn't everything this that I'm about to enumerate, I would not.
Okay.
Okay, so 10 weeks at will,
Eight. Yeah.
8,
18.
negotiable.
Okay.
Okay, let's say 10 weeks. I mean, I'm saying 10 weeks is like you don't even have to consult a doctor. You can take the second chance pill. You can, whatever, and it's no questions asked.
Okay.
You can walk into your doctor's office and say, I want an abortion.
Yeah.
And that's health care, and they can't decide not to give you health care.
Well, I think there's another issue is that there are doctors and pharmacies that will not, for their own religious reasons, will not dispense
Okay.
pills or perform certain procedures. Um, there's an issue with that, denying
I
care.
agree.
And so, wow, that's a complicated issue.
It
Um,
is, and it's not something I'm getting into here.
okay.
I would legalize abortion in the first trimester for cases of abuse, rape, incest. No question, no other questions asked. That if that's established, that is any time before that, there's no that's after that, I think there are questions. If it has been allowed to go beyond that point, why? Under what circumstance? Okay,
Well,
let me go on.
okay.
Um, in second trimester, uh, developmental abnormalities in the fetus, because it takes a while before that can be determined. And again, these are just numbers I'm throwing out here. And I would expect an actual medical panel to figure these dates out in a more to fine tune all of this.
Mhm.
Okay. And a third in the third trimester for danger to the mother. That at any point, right up till delivery, if it is a danger to the mother, the pregnancy can be terminated.
So I think I'd again the dates, the timing of this, I think there are some issues. Certainly if abuse, rape, incest can be very difficult to prove. And so um so how do you say, well, you can do this, but you got to prove this first? What if you can't prove that? So there's a problem with that. Um, I any of these, the examples I can think of, I keep coming back to it's a decision between a person and the healthcare provider, period.
All right. Like I said,
Yeah.
that's
So
that's my personal opinion as well. I
yeah,
don't think that there needs to be any excuse at any point to terminate a pregnancy.
yeah.
Personally.
Well, and I think it again it gets into definitions of personhood. Um, and it irks me to see people who don't believe in science start to try to quote science
Yeah.
incorrectly to say, well, science proves this. Well, no, you think the earth is flat, so and the
Right.
world is ending. So,
And the world's only 6,000 years old.
right. So
Yeah.
um
And that's as far as I got with my little running document. So
yeah, well, I think we've covered a lot of territory.
we
And
have.
I think I will we may choose to revisit this at some time,
Well,
but
we've got this background that so
yeah,
anytime we want to
yeah.
go back.
So I conclude with reiterating that um, the existential crises we face are the climate and authoritarianism versus democracy.
And I
And
and I think we have to deal with the latter before we can really tackle the former,
yes, because
unfortunately.
the people who are authoritarians don't give a shit about the climate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it is short-term success is all that's seems to be the
Yes.
important. So,
Um, and I think that there are, unfortunately, some people who don't understand who the authoritarians are and
yeah,
aren't.
they're not working for you, buddy.
Yeah. So,
Don't let them tell you
um,
they are. Look at what they do, not what they say.
yeah, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time, right?
Yeah.
So, I think I this has been really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope other people find it interesting. I hope so. Useful discussion. Wow, there's so much to
Yeah.
deal with. So much.
And we rarely get into specifics of politics
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
did with this. Um, and we didn't get
Well,
into left
again,
left versus right.
policy. What's that?
We didn't get into left versus right or anything like that. This is
No.
just here's the road we would tread if
Well,
given the
and
ability.
again, it comes back to our own stated philosophies. You have talked about the social contract. I've
Hmm.
talked about ethical pragmatism, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think how we exercise our politics is how we view our social contract
Yeah.
with our communities.
Yeah. And yes, and I was pleased to hear a candidate talk about being pragmatic. You know, so I think we welcome your comments, your questions, your suggestions, your ideas, um, and
Like and share,
and
um,
vote.
and please vote. Please
Yeah.
vote.
Yes. And so until we see you next time, be thou
A good night.
and true.